The Chinook helicopter's rotors hammered against the thin mountain air as Staff Sergeant Myers gripped her rifle case tighter. Below, forward operating base Sentinel looked like a collection of brown boxes scattered across the snow-dusted Afghan landscape. 12 years of service had taught her to read a base's character from the air. This one was tense, alert, expecting trouble. The helicopter touched down hard, and Maya was immediately hit by the brutal cold. At 8,000 feet, the wind cut through her gear like a knife. She grabbed her duffel and rifle case, stepping onto the landing pad where a group of young soldiers had gathered to watch the new arrivals. "Check it out! Fresh meat!" someone called. Maya ignored the comment, focusing on getting her gear clear of the rotor wash. But as she walked past the group, Corporal Jake Morrison stepped forward, his eyes locking onto her worn rifle case. The fabric was faded, patched in places with stains that told stories of a dozen firefights. "Whoa, hold up," Morrison called out, genuine disbelief in his voice. "Is that case older than you are?" Laughter rippled through the gathered soldiers. They were young, fit, and equipped with the latest gear. Their rifles gleamed with modern polymer and fresh paint. Digital scopes caught the morning light like jewelry. "Seriously, Sergeant," another soldier chimed in, "did they transfer you from a history museum?" Maya stopped, turned slowly, and met their eyes with a calm that made a few of them shift uncomfortably. She'd heard it all before. At 34, she was ancient by their standards. Her gear was worn. Her rifle was 15 years old. She didn't fit their image of a modern warrior. "It's called experience, boys," she said quietly. "You should try it sometime." Before they could respond, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Attention!" Lieutenant Derek Garrett strode across the pad, his uniform crisp despite the harsh environment. He was young, maybe 26, with the confident swagger of someone who topped every training program but had never faced real combat's chaos. His eyes swept over Maya with unconcealed disappointment. "Staff Sergeant Torres." His tone made it sound like a question, like he hoped there had been a mistake. "Sir." Maya stood at attention. Garrett circled her slowly, taking in her weathered gear. "I read your file. 4 deployments, 12 years in. Impressive numbers." He paused. "But we run cutting-edge operations here, state-of-the-art equipment, advanced tactics, modern warfare." His eyes dropped to her rifle case. "Is that what I think it is?" "M4A3, sir. Remington 700 action, Schmidt and Bender scope, maintained to factory specifications." "That rifle was phased out years ago," Garrett said, loud enough for the gathered soldiers to hear. "We use M2010 now. Computer-assisted targeting, digital rangefinders, 21st century solutions for 21st century problems." Maya kept her expression neutral. "The M40A3 has an effective range of 1,000 meters and has served Marine snipers for—" "I know the specs," Garrett interrupted. "I also know that technology has advanced. That antique might have worked in Iraq, but this is a different battlefield. These mountains demand precision equipment, not nostalgia." Morrison smirked from the crowd. "Maybe we should set up a display case in the mess hall, sir. Museum of Ancient Weaponry." More laughter. Maya didn't flinch. Garrett studied her for a long moment. "Look, I'm sure you were good in your day, but I need to know my team can perform with current systems. That rifle," he gestured dismissively, "could get someone killed." Maya's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, this rifle has kept me alive through Fallujah, Helmand, Kandahar, and the Korango Valley. It's never failed me because I've never failed it. Maintenance, discipline, and training matter more than the year on the manufacturer's label." "That's a nice speech," Garrett said, his tone condescending, "but theory doesn't survive contact with reality. Here's what's going to happen. You'll integrate with the team, observe our protocols, and if Colonel Harris approves it, we might transition you to modern equipment. Until then, consider yourself on probationary status." "Understood, sir." Garrett turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Torres, the other guys call me LT. You can call me Lieutenant Garrett. Let's keep this professional." He walked away, Morrison and the others falling in behind him, their laughter drifting back across the frozen ground. Maya stood alone on the landing pad, wind whipping around her, watching them go. She'd been here before, the outsider, the old guard, the one who didn't fit the shiny new military's image. But she'd also been in places where that shiny new equipment had failed, where batteries died, where computers crashed, and where only fundamentals kept you breathing. She picked up her duffel and rifle case, feeling the familiar weight of the M40A3 inside. 15 years old, scarred, proven, just like her. As she walked toward the barracks, she noticed one person who hadn't laughed, a grizzled sergeant near the command post, arms crossed, watching with knowing eyes. He nodded once. Maya nodded back. At least someone here understood that wars weren't won by the newest gear, but by the warriors who knew how to use what they had. The real test would come soon enough. 3 days passed in a blur of cold shoulders and whispered jokes. Maya kept to herself, studying the terrain maps, monitoring weather patterns, and maintaining her rifle with meticulous care. Every night she broke down the M4A3 completely, checking the bolt, cleaning the barrel, inspecting every component. The younger soldiers would pass by her workspace and shake their heads, unable to understand why anyone would spend 2 hours maintaining a weapon when computerized systems required minimal upkeep. On the 4th morning, the base loudspeaker crackled to life. All sniper personnel report to Range 7. Mandatory qualification in 30 minutes. Maya felt the shift in atmosphere immediately as she gathered her gear. Morrison appeared in her doorway with 3 other members of the primary sniper team, Davis, Chen, and Rodriguez. All carried their M2010 rifles with obvious pride. "Hope you're ready, Tours," Morrison said, leaning against the doorframe. "LT wants to see what the old guard can do. Should be entertaining." "I'll do my best, Corporal," Maya replied evenly, sliding her rifle into its case. "Your best," Chen laughed. "My rifle can calculate wind speed, range, and bullet drop automatically. What can yours do? Tell time." "It can hit what I aim at," Maya said simply. "That's all any rifle needs to do." Range 7 sat on a plateau overlooking a valley with targets positioned at various distances from 300 to 800 meters. The wind howled across the open space, strong enough to push a bullet several feet off course. Perfect conditions to test a sniper's skill or expose their weaknesses. Lieutenant Garrett stood at the observation post, tablet in hand, flanked by the range master, Gunnery Sergeant Mike Ramos, the same sergeant who'd nodded to Maya on her first day. Ramos had been in country for 15 months and had the weathered look of someone who'd seen real combat. "Gentlemen and lady," Garrett began, with a smirk in Maya's direction. "Today's qualification will determine your operational readiness. Each shooter will engage 10 targets at varying distances. Wind is gusting at 15 to 20 knots. This is what we call a challenging environment. Corporal Morrison, you're up first." Morrison stepped to the firing line with confidence. His M2010 was a work of art. Matte black finish, high-powered digital scope, integrated suppressor. He settled into position, and Maya watched as he activated his scope's computer system. Numbers flickered across the display. Range, wind speed, temperature, humidity, bullet trajectory, all calculated in seconds. His first shot rang out. The spotter called, "Hit, center mass, 400 meters." Morrison grinned, working through his targets with mechanical precision. 8 out of 10 hits, impressive by any standard. Davis went next, 9 out of 10. Chen followed, 7 out of 10, cursing his scope's calibration. Rodriguez managed 8 out of 10. "Tours, you're up," Garrett called, checking his watch like this was an inconvenience. Maya approached the line, her rifle case drawing stares from a growing crowd of off-duty soldiers who'd heard about the dinosaur challenge. She opened the case slowly, revealing the M4A3. Compared to the sleek, modern rifles, it looked ancient. Worn wooden stock, traditional blued steel barrel, and a manual scope that required the shooter to do all the calculations themselves. "No computer?" someone in the crowd whispered. "How's she supposed to hit anything?" Maya settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar embrace of the rifle against her shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment, not praying, but centering herself. The wind was her enemy and her teacher. She had to read it, understand it, respect it. She opened her eyes and looked downrange. The first target sat at 600 meters, a steel silhouette barely visible against the mountain backdrop. She snorted. No computer to tell her the exact distance, no digital readout for wind speed. Just her eyes, her experience, and 15 years of intimate knowledge of how this specific rifle performed. She studied the mirage rising from the ground, watched dust devils dance across the valley floor, noted how the flag at 300 meters snapped in the wind. West-southwest, gusting maybe 18 knots at her position, but could be different downrange. Temperature was dropping as clouds moved in, air density changing by the minute. Maya made her calculations, muscle memory and mental math working in harmony. She adjusted her scope's elevation and windage knobs. Click, click, click. Each click represented a precise measurement, learned through thousands of rounds fired in every condition imaginable. She controlled her breathing. In, out, finding that perfect pause between heartbeats. The trigger broke clean. Ping. Hit. Center mass. 600 meters. Ramos called, a hint of approval in his voice. Maya didn't celebrate. She was already acquiring the next target. 700 meters. Elevated position. Crosswind. Even stronger. She made her adjustments, read the wind again, and squeezed. Ping. Hit. The crowd grew quieter with each shot. No jokes now, just watching. Target 3 at 450 meters. Hit. Target 4 at 800 meters, the maximum effective range in these conditions. Maya took extra time knowing this shot would define everything. The wind shifted. She waited. Patience was a weapon too. The wind steadied for just a moment. She fired. 3 seconds of flight time. The longest 3 seconds of silence on the range. Ping. Hit. Dead center. 800 meters. Morrison's confident expression had vanished. Davis and Chan exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maya continued. Target 5, target 6, target 7. By target 8, Lieutenant Garrett had lowered his tablet, watching with reluctant attention. Targets 9 and 10 came in rapid succession. Smooth, professional, perfect. Ramos stood up from the spotting scope, his face expressionless but his eyes telling a different story. 10 for 10, all center mass or better. Average time per shot, 12 seconds. He looked at Garrett. That's the best score we've recorded at this range, sir. Under these wind conditions, maybe the best I've ever seen. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Morrison stared at his expensive rifle like it had betrayed him. Garrett's jaw worked silently for a moment before he found his voice. Lucky wind conditions, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Maya seized her rifle and stood, slinging the weapon. Over her shoulder, she walked past Morrison, pausing just long enough to meet his eyes. Wind doesn't cooperate, Corporal. You either learn to work with it, or it works against you. No computer can teach you that, only experience can. She walked off the range, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Ramos watched her go, then turned to Garrett. Sir, with all respect, that woman just outshot our entire team with a rifle that doesn't even have batteries. Maybe we should be asking her to train us, not the other way around. Garrett said nothing, but deep in his gut, a seed of doubt had been planted. Technology was impressive, but skill was something else entirely. The mood in the base shifted after the range qualification. Maya noticed it in small ways. Soldiers nodding as she passed, fewer jokes about her equipment, more curious glances than mocking ones. But respect from enlisted men didn't translate to trust from officers, and Lieutenant Garrett made sure everyone knew his position hadn't changed. One good day at the range doesn't make you relevant, he told her privately after the qualification. Real operations are different. 2 days later, that real operation landed on their doorstep. The briefing room was packed with personnel when Maya arrived. Maps covered every wall, and satellite imagery glowed on multiple screens. Colonel Harris stood at the front, his expression grave. Intelligence analysts flanked him, armed with folders stamped with red classification markers. Take your seats, Harris commanded. The room fell silent instantly. Maya slipped into a chair in the back row. Morrison and the primary sniper team occupied the front, their modern rifles propped beside them like loyal dogs. Lieutenant Garrett sat with the other officers, tablet ready, looking eager. Harris activated the main screen, and a photograph appeared. A bearded man in his 40s, eyes hard as flint, wearing traditional Afghan clothing but carrying himself with military bearing. This is Khalid Ahmadi, known as the Wolf, Harris began. Former Afghan National Army officer who defected to the Taliban 5 years ago. He's responsible for coordinating 17 attacks on coalition forces, including the ambush that killed 4 Marines in the PC Valley last month. Intelligence indicates he's operating somewhere in this valley system. He gestured to the map behind him, showing a complex network of ridges and ravines about 15 kilometers from the base. An intelligence officer stepped forward. Satellite imagery from 48 hours ago shows unusual activity. Heat signatures suggest a group of 30 to 50 combatants gathering in this area. He pointed to a village marked on the map. "We believe the wolf is planning a major attack, possibly on the village of Daria, which houses allied tribal leaders who have been cooperating with coalition forces." Garrett leaned forward, his eyes bright with ambition. Maya recognized that look. She'd seen it on young officers before, the ones who saw combat as a career opportunity rather than survival. "Sir, my team can handle this," Garrett said immediately. "We'll insert at night, establish overwatch on Ridge Alpha here." He pointed to a prominent high point overlooking the valley. "Clear sight lines, good communications, textbook sniper position. We locate the wolf, call in the strike. Mission complete." Several officers nodded approvingly. It sounded clean, professional, by the book. Maya studied the map intently, her experienced eyes tracing the terrain features, noting elevations, analyzing approaches. Something felt wrong. Ridge Alpha was too obvious, too perfect. Her instincts, honed through 4 deployments in these exact mountains, were screaming warnings. She raised her hand. Harris noticed. "Torse, you have input?" All eyes turned to her. Garrett's expression hardened. Maya stood, moving to the map. "Sir, with respect, Ridge Alpha is a natural kill zone. Any competent enemy commander would expect us to position there. Look at the terrain." She traced her finger along the approaches. 3 natural avenues of approach for enemy forces to surround that position. The high ground gives good visibility, but it's exposed on 3 sides, with limited egress routes. "The drone coverage will give us early warning," Garrett interrupted, irritation clear in his voice. "And our communications equipment can call in support within minutes." "In good weather, sir," Maya continued, undeterred. "But I've been monitoring the meteorological reports. There's a storm system moving in from the northwest. These mountains create unpredictable conditions. Atmospheric interference, rapid temperature changes, electronics fail, drones get grounded, communication windows close." "Are we supposed to plan operations around weather forecasts now?" Garrett scoffed, looking to the other officers for support. "Satellites and signals intelligence versus what? Tours, a hunch?" Maya kept her voice level, professional. "Not a hunch, sir. Pattern recognition. I've operated in these specific mountains. The enemy knows them better than we do. They understand how to use weather, terrain, and our own doctrine against us. Ridge Alpha looks perfect on satellite imagery, but on the ground it's a funnel, a trap." The room buzzed with murmurs. Some officers looked intrigued, others seemed annoyed at having their plan questioned. Harris studied the map, then looked at Maya. "What would you recommend?" "Ridge Bravo, sir." Maya pointed to a less obvious position on an adjacent ridgeline. "Harder to access, less comfortable, but it offers multiple firing angles, better escape routes, and a position that's less predictable. It's also higher elevation. If weather closes in, we're above some of the interference." Garrett stood abruptly. "Sir, with all respect, Ridge Bravo adds 2 hours to our insertion time and puts us further from the primary target area. We'd be operating on assumptions and outdated information." "Fieldcraft when we have real-time intelligence and modern systems telling us exactly where to position. Your modern systems won't mean much if they're disabled or if you're surrounded," Maya said quietly. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Harris looked between his ambitious young lieutenant and his experienced staff sergeant. This wasn't just about tactics, it was about philosophy. Trust the technology or trust the warrior? Harris made his decision. "We'll do both. Garrett, your team takes Ridge Alpha as primary overwatch, and Taurus, you'll position on Ridge Bravo as secondary observer and backup." He held up a hand before Garrett could protest. "Redundancy is good tactics. If Taurus is wrong, we have eyes on target. If she's right, we have insurance." Garrett's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." "This operation launches at 300 hours tomorrow," Harris continued. "The wolf is a high-value target, but I want everyone back alive more than I want his head on a pike. Understood?" "Yes, sir." The room responded in unison. As the briefing broke up, Maya gathered her notes and headed for the door. Morrison intercepted her in the hallway, his expression harder to read than before. "You really think it's a trap?" he asked, his earlier cockiness replaced by something else, maybe concern, maybe doubt. Maya met his eyes. "I think the wolf didn't survive 5 years against coalition forces by being predictable. Men like that understand how we think, how we operate. They use our strengths against us. And if you're wrong, if we're sitting on some useless ridge while the action happens somewhere else, then you get the glory and I get a cold night in the mountains, Maya said. But if I'm right, Corporal, I'll be the one making sure you see another sunrise. She walked away, leaving Morrison standing in the hallway, staring after her. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat in her quarters, meticulously cleaning her rifle by lamplight, each component receiving careful attention: bolt assembly, trigger mechanism, barrel cleaning, scope adjustment. This ritual had kept her alive through battles that had killed better-equipped soldiers. Outside, wind began to pick up, rattling the windows. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, backlit by moonlight. Maya reassembled her rifle, the movements automatic after 15 years. She loaded her magazines with match-grade ammunition, each round hand-selected, each one potentially the difference between life and death. Across the base, Morrison and his team were running diagnostics on their digital scopes, charging batteries, syncing communications equipment. 2 different approaches, 2 different philosophies. By dawn, they'd know which one kept you alive. Maya checked her watch. 2100 hours, 6 hours until insertion. She allowed herself a few hours of rest, her rifle within arm's reach, her mind already running through scenarios, calculating angles, preparing for the moment when technology would fail and only skill would remain. The mountains were waiting. So was the wolf, and Maya, tossed with her 15-year-old rifle, was ready to hunt. The alarm buzzed at 2:30 hours, but Maya was already awake. She learned long ago that the body knows when danger is coming, some primitive instinct that refuses to let you rest before a hunt. She dressed in layers, checking each piece of gear with ritualistic precision: cold weather clothing, load-bearing vest, ammunition pouches, water, energy bars, medical kit. Every ounce mattered when you were climbing mountains in darkness. Her rifle received final inspection under red light to preserve night vision. She ran a patch to the barrel one last time, checked the scope's mounting screws, and verified her dope card, the handwritten data on bullet trajectories at various distances and conditions. No computer backup, just laminated paper and knowledge earned through 10,000 rounds. At 2:55, both teams assembled at the base perimeter. Morrison's primary team looked like something from a recruitment poster: night vision goggles, digital camouflage, equipment bristling with technology. Their M2010 rifles gleamed even in darkness. Garrett moved among them, checking communication systems, GPS units, and thermal imaging devices. Maya stood apart, her older gear making her nearly invisible in the shadows. Gunnery Sergeant Ramos approached, his face barely visible under his watch cap. "Weather's turning," he said quietly, handing her an updated meteorological report. "Storm front's moving faster than predicted. You'll have maybe 6 hours before it hits." "That's all I'll need," Maya replied, folding the report into her pocket. "Taurus." Ramos paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was in Fallujah, second battle. I saw a lot of fancy equipment fail when the shooting started. I also saw soldiers like you who knew their weapons so well they could operate them blindfolded." He glanced toward Garrett's team. "Keep those boys alive. They don't know what they don't know yet. That's the plan, Gunny." At precisely 300 hours, both teams moved out through the wire. For the first kilometer, they traveled together, boots crunching on frozen ground, breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Then the paths diverged. "Primary team, northeast to Ridge Alpha," Garrett whispered into his radio. "Secondary, northwest to Ridge Bravo. Radio check every 30 minutes. Stay sharp." Morrison led the primary team towards their objective, a relatively easy 3-kilometer approach over moderate terrain. Their route had been carefully planned using satellite imagery and would put them in position by 0500, well before dawn. Maya's route was different. Ridge Bravo sat 4 kilometers across brutal terrain, steep inclines, loose scree, and narrow paths where one misstep meant a fatal fall. She moved alone, deliberately choosing isolation over support. A smaller profile meant harder to detect, and if things went wrong, she wouldn't risk anyone else. The climb began immediately. Within 15 minutes, Maya's legs were burning as she ascended a 40-degree slope. Her rifle secured across her back felt like it weighed twice its actual 12 pounds. The temperature dropped as she gained elevation, her breath coming harder in the thinning air. At 3:45, she paused on a narrow ledge to check her map bearings. Below, she could see the valley spreading out in moonlight, a patchwork of shadows and pale snow. Somewhere down there, the wolf was planning his next move. And somewhere ahead, Morrison's team was walking into position on Ridge Alpha, confident in their technology and their training. Maya continued climbing, using natural handholds, testing each foothold before committing her weight. This was the kind of approach the younger soldiers avoided. Too hard, too slow, too old school. But it offered something their easier route didn't: unpredictability. Her radio crackled at 4 o'clock. "Secondary, primary, radio check." "Secondary reads you broken and weak," Maya responded. Already, the atmospheric conditions were degrading communications exactly as she'd predicted. "Say again your position." Static answered her, then fragments of words. Position, minutes. "Primary, you're unreadable. We'll attempt contact in 30 mics. More static than silence. Maya grimaced but wasn't surprised. The mountains were a communications nightmare, then the approaching storm would only make it worse. She was on her own now, exactly where she preferred to be. By 4:45, she'd covered 3 kilometers and was approaching the final ascent to Ridge Bravo. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, and sweat and soaked through her base layer despite the freezing temperature, but she was close. The final approach was nearly vertical, a rock face that required actual climbing. Maya secured her rifle, found her first handhold, and began to climb. 15 feet. 20. Her fingers went numb in the cold. 30 feet. A rock shifted under her boot, and for one heart-topping moment she hung by her fingertips over a 50-foot drop. She pulled herself up with pure upper-body strength, found new footing, and continued. This was why the position was ignored by tactical planners. It was barely accessible, but that's exactly why it was valuable. At 5:10, Maya hauled herself over the final ledge and onto Ridge Bravo. She lay flat for a moment, catching her breath, feeling her heart hammer against the frozen ground. Then she moved. She found a position among a cluster of rocks that offered concealment and multiple firing angles. Natural camouflage: snow, rocks, shadows. She arranged her gear within easy reach, loaded her rifle, and settled into the position she might occupy for the next 12 hours. Through her scope, she began glassing the valley below. Dawn was still 30 minutes away, but in the growing light she could see the terrain taking shape. And there, Ridge Alpha, 2 kilometers to her east, she could just make out the position where Morrison's team should be settling in. She tried her radio again. "Primary, secondary in position, how copy?" Pure static, no response. Maya's mind raced. The atmospheric conditions, the terrain, maybe the distance, something was blocking her transmission. Morrison's team was walking into an ambush and they had no idea. Their digital communications, their sophisticated equipment, all useless in these conditions. She checked her watch. 5:28, sunrise in 12 minutes. Through her scope, she could see movement now, shapes materializing in the growing light. Taliban fighters, at least 40 of them, moving with practiced efficiency into positions that would completely encircle Ridge Alpha. They had heavy weapons, machine guns, RPGs, possibly mortars. This wasn't a patrol, this was a coordinated assault. And in the center of the enemy formation, directing the movement with hand signals, was a figure that matched the intel photos. The wolf. He was here, and he laid the perfect trap. Maya's 15-year-old rifle suddenly felt heavy in her hands. She was one soldier alone on a mountain, watching an entire platoon of enemy fighters prepare to slaughter her fellow Americans. Her radio was dead. Help was kilometers away. The storm was closing in. But she wasn't helpless. She chambered around, the familiar sound of the mechanical bolt action like a promise. The mechanical click echoed in the cold morning air. Dawn was coming, and with it, a reckoning. Maya settled into her firing position, controlled her breathing, and prepared to do what she'd been trained to do for 15 years. Hold the line, protect her own, and make every single shot count. The laughter was about to end. Dawn broke over the mountains like a wound, red and bleeding across the horizon. Maya watched through her scope as the terrible choreography of the ambush continued to unfold. The wolf's fighters moved like ghosts, using every fold in the terrain, every shadow, positioning themselves in a perfect killing circle around Ridge Alpha. They had heavy weapons, machine guns, RPGs, possibly mortars. Silhouetted against the brightening sky, 6 soldiers, confident in their position, scanning the valley below with their thermal scopes and digital rangefinders. They had no idea that death was creeping up behind them, above them, around them. Maya tried the radio one more time. Primary, this is secondary. You are surrounded. Enemy forces at your 6, 9, and 11. Acknowledge. Static screamed back at her. She slammed the radio down in frustration. The atmospheric conditions had created a perfect communications blackout. Every technological advantage Garrett's team possessed was about to become worthless. At 5:42, Maya saw the wolf raise his hand. The signal. It was about to begin. Then a flash of light from the enemy position. Not a muzzle flash. Something else. Electromagnetic. Maya's blood turned to ice. An EMP device. Crude but effective in these mountains. Designed to fry electronics within a limited radius. Through her scope, she saw Morrison suddenly jerk upright, tapping his scope frantically. The digital displays had gone dark. Garrett was shouting into his radio. She could see his mouth moving, see the panic in his body language. Their night vision, their thermal imaging, their GPS, their communications, all dead in an instant. The primary team had just gone blind. Morrison's voice suddenly crackled through Maya's radio, the transmission weak and breaking up. Op is dead. Everything's we can't. Nothing. Request immediate. The transmission died. Maya's radio still worked. Her analog equipment was immune to the EMP, but they couldn't hear her, and she could barely hear them. The Taliban opened fire. Machine gun tracers arced through the dawn light, slamming into the rocks around Ridge Alpha. Morrison's team scattered, returning fire blind. Their expensive rifles now just manual weapons in the hands of soldiers who'd never trained without their technological crutches. Maya had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would define everything. She could retreat, call for help, let the quick reaction force handle it by the book, safe, and Morrison's team would be dead before help arrived. Or she could fight. 1 rifle, 1 soldier, 40 enemies. Impossible odds. Maya settled deeper into her position, her 15-year-old rifle an extension of her will. The weapon that everyone had mocked, the technology they had called obsolete, was now the only thing standing between 6 American soldiers and a massacre. She acquired her first target, the machine gunner pouring fire into Ridge Alpha from 650 meters. No computer to calculate the shot, no digital rangefinder, just her eyes, her training, and 15 years of knowing exactly what this rifle could do. Wind from the west gusting at 12 knots, temperature 32 degrees, target moving, elevated position. She made the calculations in 3 seconds, adjustments that would have taken a computer half that time, but with less understanding of the mountain's personality. Maya controlled her breathing. In, out, in, hold. The trigger broke clean. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's trajectory, a full second of flight time. The machine gunner jerked backward, his weapon going silent, tumbling down the rocks. The Taliban fighters froze, confused. Where had that shot come from? Maya didn't give them time to figure it out. She worked the bolts smooth, practiced, mechanical. The spent casing ejected, glinting in the morning sun. A fresh round chambered. Second target. Enemy spotter at 580 meters, calling coordinates into a radio. He was directing mortar fire that would obliterate Morrison's position. Maya adjusted for the closer range, noted the wind had shifted slightly. Breathe, aim, fire. The spotter dropped, his radio tumbling from his hands. Now the enemy knew they had a problem. Fighters began scanning the ridgelines, searching for the invisible threat. But Maya had chosen her position perfectly. She was above them, behind them, in a location they'd never considered because it was too difficult to reach. She moved after her second shot, shifting 15 feet to a backup position. Never stay in one place. Never give them a pattern. Third target, an RPG gunner preparing to fire on Morrison's position. Range 720 meters. Uphill shot. Crosswind stronger now as the storm front approached. Maya made her adjustments, the mathematics of death. Mil dots and minutes of angle, windage and elevation. This was the art that no computer could truly master. The feel of the rifle, the reading of invisible air currents, the intuition born from 10,000 shots in 10,000 conditions. Fire.
Casualties unknown, providing fire. At least they knew someone was helping, even if they didn't know it was the woman with the museum-piece rifle they'd mocked 4 days ago. Maya acquired Target 8, another machine gunner trying to establish a new firing position. The mathematics flowed automatically now. Range, wind, elevation. Her hands moved without conscious thought, making micro-adjustments to the scope. Fire. Target down. The wolf was visible now through her scope, directing his fighters with desperate hand signals. He knew the ambush was failing. The invisible sniper was destroying his carefully laid plan. He was shouting, pointing, sending fighters to flank positions, trying to locate and eliminate the threat. Maya wanted him, the high-value target, the whole reason for this operation. He was standing 810 meters away at the extreme edge of her rifle's effective range. In these conditions, the shot was possible, but incredibly difficult. Miss, and she'd reveal her position for nothing. But Morrison's team was still pinned down. The enemy still had numbers, weapons, position. Taking out the wolf would break their command structure, send them into complete disarray. Maya made her decision. She would take the shot. Not now, not while he was moving, not while the wind was gusting, but soon, when the moment came. She just had to stay alive long enough to take it. Enemy fire was increasing now, some of it directed toward her ridge. They knew generally where she was, even if they couldn't pinpoint her exact location. Bullets whined off rocks nearby. An RPG detonated 50 meters below her position, the concussion wave making her ears ring. Maya shifted position again, moving through the rocks like water, never stopping, never predictable. Target 9, target 10, 11. Her ammunition was finite. She brought 60 rounds. 11 were gone. 49 remained against 30-plus enemies. The mathematics of survival. Through her scope, she saw the wolf moving toward cover, preparing to relocate. It was now or never. Maya took a breath. This shot would define everything. The most important shot of her life, with a rifle they said was too old to matter, at a distance that would challenge any shooter, in conditions that would break most soldiers. But Myers wasn't most soldiers. She was a warrior who understood that wars weren't won by the newest technology, but by the skill of the person behind the weapon. She settled the crosshairs on the wolf's center mass and prepared to prove once and for all that experience beats equipment every single time. The wolf moved with the confidence of a man who'd survived 5 years of American technology, drones, satellites, smart bombs. He believed he understood his enemy. He believed technology made them predictable. He was about to learn otherwise. Maya's crosshairs tracked him as he moved across the rocky terrain at 810 meters. This wasn't just a long shot, it was nearly impossible. The wind was gusting unpredictably, the target was moving, the angle was steep. The morning air was warming, creating thermals that would push the bullet in unexpected ways. Her M4A3 had no computer to calculate the solution, no ballistic processor, no wind meter, just Maya, her scope, and 15 years of making shots that shouldn't be possible. She watched the wolf stop behind a boulder, thinking he was safe. For 3 seconds he was partially exposed, his torso visible, giving orders to fighters she couldn't see. 3 seconds, one chance. Maya had already calculated everything. Bullet drop at this distance would be approximately 23 feet. The wind would push the round at least 4 feet right. The upward angle would reduce effective gravity on the bullet. Temperature, air pressure, even the rotation of the earth at this latitude, all factors her mind processed like a living computer. She made her final scope adjustments. Click, click, click. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The chaos of the battle faded into background noise. There was only the target, the rifle, and the shot. In, out, in. The natural pause between heartbeats. Maya squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared. The recoil punched her shoulder, a familiar friend. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's invisible arc, knowing by instinct where it would go. 3 seconds of flight time, an eternity. The wolf's head snapped back. He dropped behind the boulder and didn't rise. For a moment, the entire battlefield froze. Then chaos erupted in the enemy ranks. The Taliban fighters had just watched their commander fall to an impossible shot from an invisible enemy. The psychological impact was devastating. These were hardened fighters, but everyone has a breaking point. When your leader dies from a ghost you can't even locate, fear becomes contagious. Maya didn't pause to celebrate. She worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round. The enemy was breaking, but they were still dangerous. Wounded animals fight hardest. She acquired target 12, a fighter trying to rally the others. Range, 590 meters. The wind had shifted again, now coming from the northwest. She adjusted. Fire. Down. Target 13, 14. Each shot precise, professional, without mercy. This wasn't personal. This was mathematics. This was survival. This was ensuring Morrison and his team lived to see tomorrow. The Taliban began a disorganized retreat, dragging wounded comrades, abandoning equipment. Their carefully planned ambush had become a slaughter, but not the slaughter they'd intended. Maya shifted focus to the immediate threats near Ridge Alpha. An enemy fighter was flanking Morrison's position, AK-47 raised. Maya's shot caught him mid-stride at 445 meters. He crumpled into the snow. Another fighter emerged with an RPG, aiming at the cluster of rocks where Morrison's team had taken cover. Maya's bullet found him before his finger reached the trigger. The RPG round detonated harmlessly against a distant cliff face. Her radio suddenly crackled with clearer reception. The atmospheric conditions were shifting as the storm front arrived. "No, but thank your saving hour," Morrison's voice, broken but alive. Meyer to Mike, primary, secondary hostiles are retreating northwest. Maintain defensive posture. QRF inbound.
Okay, secondary, Morrison's voice caught. We owe you everything. Just stay alive, Marine. That's all the payment I need. She returned to her scope, providing overwatch as the enemy scattered. A few fighters tried to recover the wolf's body, but Maya's warning shots convinced them to abandon the effort. Their leader's corpse would be valuable intelligence, weapons, documents, communication devices. At 6:12, Maya heard the beautiful sound of helicopter rotors. 2 Apache gunships crested the ridge, followed by Chinooks carrying the quick reaction force. The cavalry had arrived. The Apaches made gun runs on the retreating Taliban, their 30 cannons tearing into the mountainside. The few enemy fighters who hadn't fled fast enough were cut down or surrendered. A Chinook touched down near Ridge Alpha, and Maya watched through her scope as Morrison's team was abstracted. They moved like men who'd seen death up close, shaky, exhausted, grateful to be breathing. Another helicopter diverted toward her position. Maya secured her rifle, gathered her spent brass, 23 casings, 23 shots fired, and moved to the landing zone she'd identified during her insertion. The Chinooks settled onto the rocky ridge, rotors whipping snow into blinding clouds. The crew chief jumped out, eyes wide when he saw her alone. "Your secondary?" he shouted over the rotor noise. Maya nodded, climbing aboard. "Jesus Christ! We thought you were a whole squad!" The thermal imaging showed 23 confirmed enemy kills from this position. "Just me," Maya said, settling into the troop seat, her rifle across her lap. The crew chief stared at her weapon. "With that?" "With this." As the helicopter lifted off, Maya looked down at the battlefield. Enemy bodies scattered across impossible angles. The Wolf's position, where a shot that shouldn't have been possible had ended a 5-year manhunt. Ridge Alpha, where 6 Marines were alive because one soldier with an obsolete rifle had refused to let them die. The flight back to Fob Sentinel took 12 minutes. Maya spent it in silence, running through the engagement in her mind, analyzing what she could have done better. Professional soldiers don't celebrate kills, they evaluate performance. As the base came into view, she could see personnel gathering at the landing pad. Word had already spread. The radio chatter had been monitored. Everyone knew what had happened. The Chinook catched down and Maya stepped off into a wall of stairs. Soldiers lined the pad, some curious, some respectful, some disbelieving. Morrison stood at the front of the crowd. His expensive M2010 hung at his side, still non-functional from the EMP. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. When he saw Maya, he straightened to attention. She walked toward him, her 15-year-old rifle slung over her shoulder. Morrison's voice cracked when he spoke. "Staff Sergeant Torres, we were dead. We were completely dead." And then he couldn't finish. The other members of his team stood behind him. Davis, Chen, Rodriguez, even Lieutenant Garrett. All of them wore the same expression, the look of soldiers who'd been given back their lives. Garrett stepped forward. His earlier arrogance had been burned away, replaced with something harder and more honest. "I owe you an apology," he said simply, "and a lot more than that." Maya met his eyes. "You owe me nothing, sir. We're all on the same team." "That rifle," Garrett gestured at her M43, "we called it obsolete, useless." "You called it those things," Maya corrected gently. "The rifle just kept working." Gunnery Sergeant Ramos pushed through the crowd, a rare smile on his weathered face. 23 confirmed kills, including the wolf himself, at, he checked a tablet, 810 meters, in high wind, with a manual scope. "Torres, that's going in the record books." "It's going in the after-action report," Colonel Harris said, appearing from the command building, along with a recommendation for the Silver Star. "You saved 6 American lives today, Torres, against impossible odds." The crowd murmured approval. Some soldiers clapped. Others just stared at the woman who'd done what entire drone squadrons and satellite networks couldn't do: win a battle with skill, courage, and a rifle they'd laughed at. Maya felt the weight of their attention and didn't particularly like it. She was a professional, not a hero. Heroes were for movies. She was just a soldier who'd done her job. "Permission to clean my weapon, sir?" she asked Harris. He smiled. "Granted, but Torres, don't go far. We need to debrief, and I suspect half the base is going to want to talk to you." Maya nodded and headed toward the armory, wanting nothing more than to break down her rifle, clean it properly, and give it the care it had earned. Behind her, she heard Morrison's voice. "Did you see her face? She doesn't even realize what she just did." Ramos chuckled. "Oh, she realizes. She's just done it before. That's what real professionals look like." The laughter was gone. In its place was something Maya valued far more: respect. The debriefing room felt smaller than it was, packed with officers, intelligence analysts, and senior enlisted personnel. Maya sat at the head of the table, her rifle now cleaned and secured, resting in its case beside her. A digital recorder captured every word. Maps covered the walls, marked with positions, trajectories, and casualty assessments. Colonel Harris stood at the front, his expression of professional respect mixed with something approaching awe. "Staff Sergeant Torres, walk us through your engagement. Start from when you first identified enemy movement." Maya spoke clearly, methodically, without embellishment. She detailed each shot, the range, the conditions, the target. When she mentioned the shot that killed the wolf, several officers exchanged glances. 810 meters? The intelligence officer interrupted. "In gusting winds? Moving target? No computer assistance? That's, Staff Sergeant, that's an extraordinary shot, even for Olympic-level marksmen." "It was within my rifle's effective
Range, Maya said simply. "And I had good visibility. Most snipers wouldn't attempt that shot," Garrett said quietly from his seat. He'd been silent for most of the debriefing, still processing the day's events. "I wouldn't have attempted it." Maya turned to him. "Most snipers train with equipment that makes the calculations for them, sir. When that equipment fails, they're at a disadvantage. I trained without computers, so when there are no computers, nothing changes for me." The room absorbed that statement. It wasn't arrogance. It was simple truth delivered without ego. Harris pulled up thermal imagery from the Apache gunships that had arrived during the final phase. The screen showed heat signatures, enemy positions marked in red, friendly forces in blue, and a single green marker on Ridge Bravo. The Apache pilots reported something unusual, Harris said. They counted 23 enemy casualties before they even engaged, all from precision fire, all from your position. He zoomed in on the tactical display. "Tours, you were tracking and engaging targets across a 180-degree arc at ranges from 400 to 810 meters in rapidly changing conditions. That's not just marksmanship. That's battlefield awareness at the highest level." Maya nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing. "The EMP device," an intelligence officer spoke up. "It disabled all our digital equipment within a 500-meter radius. Their radios, their scopes, everything. But your equipment was unaffected." "Analog systems don't have circuits to fry," Maya explained. "My scope is glass and metal. My rifle is mechanical. The most advanced technology in my kit is probably my watch, and even that's automatic, not digital." Morrison raised his hand from where he sat with his team. Harris nodded. "Permission?" "Staff Sergeant," Morrison began, his voice carrying weight it hadn't possessed before. When our scopes died, we panicked. We're trained on digital systems. When those failed, we didn't know what to do. He swallowed hard. You saved our lives because we didn't know how to function without technology. That's on us. That's on the training pipeline, Maya corrected gently. You're excellent Marines, Corporal. You just learned today that technology is a tool, not a replacement for skill. Now you know that knowledge will keep you alive in the future. Davis spoke up, the young private who joked about Maya's rifle being museum-worthy. Will you train us to shoot like you do without the computers? Before Maya could answer, Harris interjected. I'm reassigning tours to lead sniper training for this AO effective immediately. Every sniper team in this region will learn analog backup procedures. He looked directly at Maya. If that's acceptable to you, Staff Sergeant. Yes, sir. Happy to pass on what I know. The debriefing continued for another hour. Tactical analysis, lessons learned, equipment recommendations. When it finally concluded, the officers filed out, but Morrison's team lingered. Chan approached first, extending his hand. I called your rifle a museum piece. I was an idiot. Maya shook his hand. Your rifle is an excellent weapon, Chen. You just need to learn it can still function when the batteries die. Iron sights, manual ranging, it's all still possible. Rodriguez stepped forward next. How long did it take you to get that good? 15 years, Maya said honestly, and 10,000 rounds, maybe more. There's no shortcut, just practice, failure, learning, and more practice. 15 years, Rodriguez repeated, looking at his own rifle with new eyes. And we thought 3 months of sniper school made us experts. 3 months made you qualified, Maya said. 15 years made me experienced. There's a difference. Morrison was last. He stood before Maya, his earlier cockiness completely absent. I need to know something. When you saw us about to be overrun, did you consider retreating, calling for help, and getting to safety? Maya met his eyes for about 3 seconds. Then I remembered that Marines don't leave Marines behind. Technology might fail, equipment might break, but that principle, that's permanent. Morrison's eyes glistened. 23 shots, 23 lives you saved. I'll never forget that. None of us will. Good, Maya said. Don't forget. And when you're training the next generation, make sure they understand that the warrior matters more than the weapon. Always has, always will. Lieutenant Garrett appeared in the doorway. Tours, can I speak with you privately? Morrison's team filed out, each one offering respectful nods. When they were alone, Garrett closed the door and leaned against it. I was wrong. About you, about your rifle, about what matters in combat. I let my career ambition and my faith in technology blind me to fundamental truths. He paused. I could have gotten my entire team killed because I was too arrogant to listen to experience. But you didn't, Maya said. Your team survived. That's what matters. They survived because you disobeyed the spirit of my orders, Garrett countered. I positioned you on Ridge Bravo to shut you up, not because I believed you were right. You knew that, and you went anyway, prepared to fight a battle I didn't think would happen. I followed my orders, sir. You put me on Ridge Bravo. I used that position to accomplish the mission. Garrett smiled slightly. You're being diplomatic. We both know the truth. He straightened. I'm recommending you for the Silver Star, and I'm requesting that you be assigned as senior sniper instructor for all special operations in this theater. We need warriors like you teaching the next generation, not desk jockeys like me who think PowerPoint presentations win wars. You're not a desk jockey, Lieutenant. You're a combat leader who learned a hard lesson. That makes you more valuable now than you were yesterday. Maybe. Garrett moved toward the door, then stopped. That rifle of yours, the one we all mocked, what are you going to do when it finally wears out? Maya smiled. Sir, if I maintain it properly,
It'll outlast both of us. That's the point everyone keeps missing. New doesn't mean better. It just means new. Better comes from the person holding the weapon and the care they give it. Garrett nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. 15 years you've carried that rifle? 15 years, 4 deployments, 12 countries. It's never let me down because I've never let it down. I understand now, Garrett said. It's not about the rifle. It's about the relationship between the warrior and the weapon. Now you're learning, sir. After Garrett left, Maya sat alone in the briefing room for a moment. Through the window, she could see the mountains where the battle had taken place. Somewhere out there, the wolf's body was being processed by intelligence personnel. His network would be disrupted. Lives would be saved because he could no longer plan attacks.
But Maya didn't think about the enemy she'd killed. She thought about the 6 Americans she'd kept alive: Morrison, Davis, Chen, Rodriguez, and the others whose names she was still learning. They'd go home someday. They'd see their families. They'd live lives that would have ended today if not for an obsolete rifle and a soldier who refused to let technology replace skill. Her radio crackled. "Torres, this is Ramos. Colonel wants you at the command post. Press is asking questions about today's engagement. Higher headquarters is involved." Maya grimaced. She hated the political side of warfare. The medals, the press releases, the transformation of survival into propaganda. "On my way, Gunny." She picked up her rifle case and headed out into the Afghan afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and gold, beautiful and deadly like everything in this country. Soldiers stopped and saluted as she passed. Word had spread throughout the base. The woman with the 15-year-old rifle had become a legend in the span of a single morning. But legends weren't what Maya cared about. She cared about the young Marines who would learn from today. She cared about passing on knowledge that couldn't be downloaded or purchased. She cared about ensuring that when technology failed, and it always eventually failed, warriors would still know how to fight. The laughter was gone. In its place was respect, understanding, and a lesson that would echo through military training for years to come. Sometimes the old ways survive because they're not old, they're just proven. 3 days after the battle, the base had transformed. Maya noticed it in everything: the way soldiers straightened when she passed, the requests for training that flooded Colonel Harris's office, the quiet conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Fame was uncomfortable, but the opportunity to teach was invaluable. The armory had become her second home. On the 3rd evening, she sat at a workbench, her M4A3 completely disassembled before her. Each component laid out with surgical precision: bolt assembly, trigger group, firing pin, scope mounts. 15 years of carbon buildup, microscopic wear, the honest evidence of a weapon that had earned its keep. "Thought I'd find you here." Maya looked up to see Morrison standing in the doorway, his own rifle case in hand. Behind him stood Davis, Chen, and Rodriguez. All of them had the tentative look of students approaching a master. "Can't sleep?" Maya asked, returning to her cleaning. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that machine gun aimed at us," Morrison admitted. "Then I see it go silent before the shooter could fire. Your shot." He moved closer, watching her hands work. "Staff Sergeant, we want to learn. Really learn. Not the 3-month course version, the 15-year version." Maya studied their faces. The arrogance was gone, burned away by the reality of combat. In its place was genuine humility and hunger for knowledge. "Put your rifles on the bench," she said. They complied, laying down their M2010s beside her disassembled M4A3. The contrast was stark: sleek, modern weapons bristling with rails and electronics, next to the simple, elegant components of her rifle. "First lesson," Maya began, gesturing to both weapons. "These are tools, just tools. They don't make you deadly. Training makes you deadly. Discipline makes you deadly. Repetition until the weapon becomes an extension of your body. That's what makes you deadly." She picked up her bolt assembly. "This bolt has cycled approximately 50,000 times. I know its resistance, its quirks, exactly how it feels when it's properly lubricated versus when it needs attention. Can you say the same about your rifles?" Morrison shook his head. "We clean them according to the manual, check the computer systems, replace batteries. But do you know them?" Maya pressed. "Close your eyes, Morrison, right now. Tell me the exact weight of your rifle with a full magazine." Morrison closed his eyes, concentrating. 11 pounds? Maybe 12? "Open your eyes. Tell me after you weigh it." Morrison placed his rifle on the digital scale. 11 pounds 6 ounces. "Now tell me," Maya said, "if you add a suppressor, adjust for high altitude, and engage a target at 700 meters in a crosswind, how does that weight change your hold, your breathing pattern, your trigger squeeze?" Silence. "You don't know because the computer compensates," Maya continued. "But when that computer dies, and it will eventually die, whether from EMP, cold, moisture, or simple battery failure, you need to know your weapon so intimately that you can make those calculations instinctively." She began reassembling her rifle, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, we start training, real training. No computers, no digital crutches, just fundamentals. And I'm warning you now, it's going to be harder than anything you've done. You'll feel it. Like beginners again. Your pride will take a beating." "We don't have pride anymore," Chin said quietly.
You killed that along with the wolf. Maya smiled slightly. Good. Pride gets you killed. Confidence earned through competence keeps you alive. There's a difference. The armory door opened again, and Gunnery Sergeant Ramos entered, carrying a wooden case Maya didn't recognize. "Colonel asked me to deliver this," Ramos said, placing the case on the bench. "Said you've earned it." Maya opened the case carefully. Inside was a brand-new M2010 ESR, the most advanced sniper rifle in the American arsenal. Custom-built, top-tier optics, every modern feature available. It was worth more than most cars. "Colonel Harris wanted you to have the best equipment available," Ramos explained. "Said the military owes you that much." Maya ran her hand along the rifle's sleek surface. It was beautiful, perfectly engineered, a masterpiece of modern weaponry. Any sniper in the world would be honored to carry it. She closed the case. "Please thank the colonel," Maya said, "but I'll stay with what I have." Morrison's eyes widened. "You're turning down a $40,000 rifle?" "I'm staying with the rifle that's kept me alive for 15 years, Maya corrected. "This new one is magnificent, but it's not mine. I don't know its personality. I haven't fired 10,000 rounds through it. I don't know how it behaves when it's cold, hot, dirty, or wet." She picked up her reassembled M4A3, the worn wood stock fitting her hands like an old friend. "This rifle and I have an understanding. We've been through hell together. We trust each other. That's worth more than any upgrade." Ramos nodded with understanding. "I'll let the colonel know, though I think he expected that answer." "However," Maya continued, looking at Morrison's team, "I'll use it as a training tool. You'll all learn both systems, analog and digital. When we're done, you'll be able to operate effectively, whether you have the latest technology or a rifle from the Korean War." "When do we start?" Rodriguez asked. "I told you, 6:00 tomorrow, range 7. Bring your rifles, a notebook, and an open mind. Leave your egos in your bunks." They nodded, gathering their weapons. As they headed for the door, Davis paused. "Staff Sergeant, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Why did you stay in? 15 years is a long time. You could have retired, trained civilians, made more money with less danger." Maya considered the question, her eyes distant. "Because every generation of warriors needs someone to teach them that warfare isn't about technology. It's about the human behind the weapon. It's about discipline, skill, and the willingness to hold the line when everything else fails." She looked at each of them. 3 days ago, your computers failed. Your scopes died. Your communications went dark. But you didn't quit. You didn't surrender. You fought with what you had left. Your rifles, your training, and your courage. That's what I stay to teach. That's what matters. Morrison met her eyes. "We won't forget any of it." "Make sure you don't," Maya said. "And make sure you pass it on to whoever comes after you. That's how knowledge survives warrior to warrior, generation to generation." After they left, Ramos lingered. "You know the story's already spread beyond this base, right? CNN, Fox, military blogs, everyone's talking about the sniper with the 15-year-old rifle who took down the wolf. They're calling you a legend." Maya grimaced. "I'm not a legend, Gunny. I'm just a soldier who did her job." "Maybe," Ramos said, "but legends serve a purpose. They inspire. They teach. They remind people that skill and courage matter more than equipment budgets." He headed for the door, then turned back. "However," Maya continued, looking at Morrison's team, "I'll use it as a training tool. You'll all learn both systems, analog and digital. When we're done, you'll be able to operate effectively, whether you have the latest technology or a rifle from the Korean War." "When do we start?" Rodriguez asked. "I told you, 6:00 tomorrow, range 7. Bring your rifles, a notebook, and an open mind. Leave your egos in your bunks." They nodded, gathering their weapons. As they headed for the door, Davis paused. "Staff Sergeant, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Why did you stay in? 15 years is a long time. You could have retired, trained civilians, made more money with less danger." Maya considered the question, her eyes distant. "Because every generation of warriors needs someone to teach them that warfare isn't about technology. It's about the human behind the weapon. It's about discipline, skill, and the willingness to hold the line when everything else fails." She looked at each of them. 3 days ago, your computers failed, your scopes died, your communications went dark, but you didn't quit. You didn't surrender. You fought with what you had left, your rifles, your training, and your courage. That's what I stay to teach. That's what matters. Morrison met her eyes. We won't forget any of it. Make sure you don't, Maya said, and make sure you pass it on to whoever comes after you. That's how knowledge survives warrior to warrior, generation to generation. After they left, Ramos lingered. You know the story's already spread beyond this base, right? CNN, Fox, military blogs, everyone's talking about the sniper with the 15-year-old rifle who took down the wolf. They're calling you a legend. Maya grimaced. I'm not a legend, Gunny. I'm just a soldier who did her job. Maybe, Ramos said, but legends serve a purpose. They inspire. They teach. They remind people that skill and courage matter more than equipment budgets. He headed for the door, then turned back. Besides, you've already changed things here. I've got 23 requests from snipers across the theater asking for training in analog techniques. You've started something important. Alone again, Maya finished her maintenance routine. She ran a final patch through the barrel, checked the scope 0, and secured the rifle in its case. Tomorrow would be the first of many training sessions. Young warriors eager to learn what technology couldn't teach them. She thought about Morrison's question, why stay in? The truth was deeper than training the next generation. She stayed because she understood something fundamental. Warriors needed to remember that they were more than their equipment. In an age of drones and smart weapons, someone had to teach that human skill still mattered. The laughter that had greeted her arrival was long gone. In its place was something more valuable. Respect earned through action, knowledge proven through results, and a lesson that would echo through the military for years. Technology would always advance. New rifles would replace old ones, computers would get faster, scopes more sophisticated, but the fundamental truth remained unchanged. The weapon doesn't make the warrior. The warrior makes the weapon. Maya turned off the armory lights and headed into the Afghan night. Above, stars blazed in the thin mountain air, the same stars warriors had navigated by for thousands of years, long before GPS and digital maps. Some things never changed, and some lessons were eternal. The story of the 15-year-old rifle had just begun, but for Myers, it was simply another day in a long career of proving that experience, skill, and dedication would always triumph over the newest technology. The laughter was gone. The legend had begun, and tomorrow, a new generation would start learning why. The end.